Let's talk about grief and how complicated this process is for us scapegoats who survive a narcissistic family system and eventually, you know, emotionally detach or go no contact with our narcissistic family system. Um, you know, everything that I will tell you around the subject of grief and how we scapegoats grieve our losses will be absolutely denied by the narcissistic family system, by the enablers, by people who don't understand narcissistic abuse. We scapegoats are not given the same right to grieve as someone who's sort of has a regular grief, right? If somebody experiences a loss and they mourn that loss, generally they will have support and empathy. But this is not something that scapegoats will have in their grieving process. And I think that is one of the most hardest things, because when we grieve, we are often met with exasperation, sometimes bullying, invalidation. You know, anybody who enabled the narcissist, any family member, they will not, anybody who doesn't understand scapegoating, you know, they will confuse our grieving with victimhood. Now, there is a huge difference between, you know, self-victimizing, right? You know, when you play victim so that you can excuse bad behavior, so that you can use guilt to get other people to serve you forever, so that you don't help yourself, right? My narcissistic mother was like that, you know. It was constantly using this victimhood, and therefore, you know, you have to accept the abuse, right? I mean, victimhood in these times of systems is utilized in a very sick and twisted way. And there's a difference between playing, you know, the victim, or throwing a temper tantrum, right? Or being like emotionally dysregulated or called crazy, as they would treat us. There's a difference between all of that and genuinely having to process your deep and complicated emotions that all of us have to go through after being scapegoated. The thing about grief is that you have to allow yourself to feel it. You have to allow yourself to go through it if you want to heal. And you know, many of us will not have been given permission to do so, so we have to do it alone. Now, we scapegoats have a lot to grieve. We grieve the family that simply wasn't there to shield us from the harm caused by an emotionally unstable, narcissistic caregiver. You know, they failed to shield us. Instead, they enabled and they told us to be quiet when we reacted to their abuses. You know, it was denied. And the impact of what that did to us was also completely denied. And the fact that people that we love have done this, have denied what somebody did to us, even though they could see it, but they still would deny it. It's a lot of grief. You know, we have to grieve this, you know, this betrayal that the people that we love have made us go through, that we've experienced, you know. We have to mourn the empty space where a mother or father should have stood, or, you know, both sometimes as well, right? I wasn't allowed to grieve that I wasn't, that I didn't have an emotionally available mother. In fact, it was something that it was completely dismissed, you know? And yet this is something that we have to give ourselves permission to grieve. We have to give ourselves permission to grieve the fact that we didn't have the normality of a present and emotionally present parent. A parent that made us feel emotionally safe in their presence. We mourned the loss of the opportunities and achievements that we were never given the chance to pursue. You know, because of course, the narcissist will have destroyed and demonized. They will have treated our self-discovery process and our curiosity about ourselves and the world as oppositional, defiant behavior. We have to mourn the belief that there will ever be any fairness or justice or accountability. When I was grieving all of this, I want to describe to you this experience because I want you to know that if you're grieving right now, the grief can pass, and it does, but you have to allow yourself to feel it. When you grieve, it absolutely feels like you're in a fog. It feels like nothing good exists in your reality. It feels like hopeless and desperate, and like the pain is like as if you can't take the pain anymore. The pain is like a bottomless pit almost. It's physical. In the beginning, the grief really was quite persistent, and it took about a good year or two before I started to breathe fresher air, after I went no contact. But it does have, it's not forever. The grief is a passage, is a bridge. You have to go through it to get better. And as you grieve, you will have all sorts of experiences come up, emotions, and when you think of the unfairness of it all at the end of the day as well, when I think about the golden child, for example, when he was a teenager, I was there to soften the blows. I was there with him. I played with him. We had games together. We bonded together, when our parents had huge, crazy fights. I was there for him. We were sort of a team, as brother and sister. It sort of made surviving that household a bit easier, and especially the crazy, violent fights, the screaming and the yelling and the wall punching that we experienced when we were kids, But, he's older than me, so when I was 12, 13, he was gone. He was working, college, he met a girl, he got integrated with a new family. He got integrated in a new family, and when that happened to him, he never looked back. But when I was 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, I would often ask for help. I would say, hey, I'm still here. I was still stuck in that house as a young girl. But as the years went by, the more I asked for help, the more that I was shut down, and the more that, it's like the memory of everything that's ever happened to us as kids disappeared, and like it's as if his reality and the good things that happened to him was the only reality that mattered. And I was even met with laughter. When I would tell him the things that she would tell me and what she would do, he would laugh. It was funny. It's so funny when you say it like that. It's so funny. So funny, he would say. The betrayal that we go through as we think about how those people treated us, when they left us to fend for ourselves alone with that narcissistic parent. It's very hard to come to terms with, I gotta tell you, and to make peace within. And so I want to talk to you about the process of processing this grief and the injustice and coping with all of this. First of all, it's so important that you acknowledge your emotions. You're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to feel what you feel. You know what I mean? How you feel is normal, and you're supposed to feel how you feel. Don't suppress how you feel. If you need to cry, cry it out. Cry it out, and allow yourself to really sit with your emotions and go towards them. I know it's sort of counterintuitive, because when we feel difficult emotions, it's like, oh no, I don't want to feel this, and you want to distract yourself with things. But it's really important that you allow yourself to feel what you feel, so that you go through the process. The only way out of this is like through, really. So you have to allow yourself to feel your emotions, and they will lose power over you as you go through this. But this is a slow process, so you have to permit yourself to grieve everything that you've been through. And it's important that as you go through this, that you actually seek out help, and that you find communities or someone that you can talk to, if you can, so that a safe space to talk. If you can't afford therapy, then maybe join a community. Do find a community that you can talk to, and express yourself if you can. And that leads me to expressing yourself. You have to let it out of your system. I created coloring books through this process. I got super creative. I had to let it out of my system somehow. And so I invite you to do the same thing. Express yourself creatively. Engage in outlets, painting, music, writing, whatever it is that speaks to you. Try and find a creative outlet so that you can let it out of your system. It's also important that you practice a lot of self-compassion, because don't get angry at yourself. I remember feeling very angry at myself, because I was like, when does this grief end? This grief has no end. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. I'm doing the mantras, and I'm doing the exercise, and I'm doing the creative process. I'm doing all that stuff. When does the healing come? When does it come? I was so angry. But it does come eventually. But you have to be patient with yourself, and you have to allow yourself, be compassionate towards yourself. You've been through a lot. There's a lot to untangle. You've been through a lot. So it's normal for you to go through this dark period, but just remember, it's not forever. It will pass. It does pass. After that, I want to tell you that it's really important for you to have strong boundaries in place, because you don't want toxic people to, have a say in your grieving process, Flying monkeys, toxic Christmas cards, people that invalidate how you feel. Try and steer clear of all of that while you are grieving. You have to allow yourself to feel what you feel and release. Talk to safe people. Don't be careful not to, just set your boundaries. Don't allow unsafe people in while you're going through that process. And what you have to do is actually prioritize yourself throughout this process. Prioritize your self-care. Make yourself the first priority, your first priority. Of course, if you have kids, they're a priority, but I'm just talking in general that your grieving process, you have to prioritize your self-care during this process, and focus on activities that will sort of nurture your emotional and physical health. And, practicing mindfulness is also really helpful. Now, I want to explain to you, mindfulness and gratitude, those two things, they may not have a very good reputation if you're a survivor of narcissistic abuse, because people tell you to practice mindfulness and practice gratitude when everything is falling apart, and when you're like at the bottom of the well. It can feel really, it can make one angry, really, when you think about that. But mindfulness, the way that I would invite you to practice mindfulness is actually like being aware of what's going on around you, and being aware of the balancing between what's happening within and what's going on outside. So if you feel like the grief is really, really, really deep, and it's overwhelming, and all you can do is just, all you're doing is zooming in on how terrible the whole situation is. It's practicing mindfulness will help you so that like start focusing on what's happening outside of you. So like maybe go for a walk in the forest and pay attention to where you are, pay attention to nature, pay attention to the trees, touch the tree bark, pay attention to the birds singing around you. I know it sounds kind of silly, but it's true. Pay attention to what's going on around you so that you come out of that internal place that you're stuck in. Come out of that internal place that you're stuck in, and instead pay attention to what's going on around you. Be mindful of where you are, who you're talking to, you know, like if you're at work or if you're talking to a friend. Be really mindful of that moment and who you're talking to, where you are, so that you can sort of not be sucked into because it feels like there's no end to the grief, right? It feels like the void it's like so deep that you could just keep sinking and sinking and sinking. So when you feel like that, pay attention to what's around you. So when I talk about mindfulness, that's what I mean. And when I talk about gratitude, that's also what I mean. Try and name like 3 things that you're grateful for. You know, don't do it too much, but this is not about denying your grief. This is just to go, all right, remind yourself that there are things that you can hold on to. You know, it's important to do that while you're grieving, because the grief will really, it puts a veil over your eyes, and it's so desperate. But I want to tell you that beyond the grief and beyond your narcissistic family system, there is a completely different world waiting for you. There's so much more beyond that mentality and that toxic loop that you've been stuck in, okay? And that's something to look forward to. That's something that you can hold on to, because that feeling is not forever. And this period is also a good period for you to actually start exploring your own identity. You know, you can actually finally, for the first time, embark on this journey of self-discovery and learning about who you are, who your authentic self is, beyond, you know, the constraints of your narcissistic family system. I had to go no contact to really start discovering my potential and what I was good at and my strengths, and discovering that my strengths were actually not bad. I wasn't oppositional, you know, as my narcissistic mother taught me. You know, there is so much more beyond that system. So when you go no contact for the first time, keep in mind that this is really that time for you to start this journey of self-exploration, you know. And as you grieve, I want to tell you also, forgive yourself, okay? Let go of any blame or guilt associated with whatever happened to you as the scapegoat. No more I should have, I could have, you know, no more self-blame. You did what you did to protect yourself. You did what you did with the tools that you were given, which wasn't much. If you came from a narcissistic family system, you weren't given that many tools to make the right decisions in your life. They set you up. They set you up, you know, for failure. They do. They set you up for failure. They invalidate who you are as a person. They don't allow you to thrive. They demonize everything that you do. And then when you don't thrive, they turn to you and they say, oh, how come you're not thriving? You're a failure. You're a disappointment to the family. There's no winning. There's no winning. So no more I should have, I could have. No more. Forgive yourself for your mistakes. Everything that you did your best. You did your best. Always remember that you're dealing with a narcissist. You're dealing with a narcissistic family system. What happened to you wasn't your fault. And so now you have to start, you know, really taking care of yourself and really focusing on yourself, your self-care, your mental health, and protecting yourself. Okay, that's the most important thing that you can do right now. So the main thing that I want to really remind you is that grief, you know, it will pass. If it's really hard to go past it though, do get some help. Do go talk to someone, go see a professional. If you can, go join a community. But remember that grief does pass. Allow it to take its course. As uncomfortable as these feelings are, they will lead you. It's like a bridge that you have to cross to get to the other side. Grief is that bridge that you have to cross to get to the other side. And as you cross that bridge, eventually you do get to the other side. And all of a sudden, things change. All of a sudden you start noticing that things are actually peaceful. All of a sudden you start noticing that actually, you're not the problem. Because because you're just not. You're not. You start noticing these things. You start noticing that, there's so much more to life beyond that darkness that they created. And grief is that bridge that will help you see that. So allow yourself to grieve. Allow yourself to feel what you're supposed to feel. And I really hope that this helped you a little bit. And remember throughout this process, repeat, I love myself, I trust myself, and pay attention to yourself the most. Because you must come first now. Take good care of yourself.